We got to talk about this Jimmy Butler suspension real quick, y'all, because it's getting ugly. As y'all could see, I'm in the childhood home. I didn't even expect to make a video because I'm only here for the day. But luckily, I brought my camera and mic because I knew some stuff might happen. And sure enough, as I was driving back here yesterday from Fort Myers to Broward, I got a notification and, I'm driving. So obviously, I'm not trying to look at my phone. But I see the Bleacher Report. I see the little red siren emoji. And I say, let me just glance at my phone real quick. And I see the notification that says the Miami Heat have suspended Jimmy Butler for 7 games. So immediately I was like, God damn. And I was sitting with my girl. She was in the driver's seat, my little passenger princess. And she was like, damn, she's like, what happened? And I was like, the Heat just suspended Jimmy Butler for 7 games. Because, I've been keeping her up to date on the whole saga and everything that's going on. And you know what she said to me? She was like, boy, stop crying about Jimmy Butler. You've been shedding tears for the last 24 hours since the Shams article came out. And I said, that's a good point. I probably should stop crying because this is reality. As Barry Jackson said a couple years ago, accept reality. Except now it's in a different context. Back then it was the Heat like their team. They're not going to make any moves except reality. Well, because of that, it led to this whole situation that's now getting pretty ugly, as the Heat actually put out an official statement that said, we have suspended Jimmy Butler for 7 games for multiple instances of conduct detrimental to the team over the course of the season, and particularly in the last several weeks. Through his actions and statements, he has shown he no longer wants to be part of the team. Jimmy Butler and his representative have indicated that they wish to be traded. Therefore, we will listen to offers. Several interesting pieces about that. For one, it says they're suspending him for stuff over the course of the entire season, particularly the last several weeks, where if you think about what's occurred with Jimmy Butler in recent times, it's been the whole sickness thing, which, of course, I never like to question anyone's health. And I'm sure Jimmy Butler is a guy that always wants to play, but it seemed really weird that we literally saw him turn an ankle the game after literally having his best performance in a regular season Heat game ever, right? Against the Pistons when he had like 35, 19, and 10. So he rolls the ankle 7 minutes into the following game versus the Thunder, and then he's ruled out for the rest of the game with a stomach illness. But then he misses a week with a stomach illness. Y'all ever miss a week with a stomach illness? That's like a 24-hour thing. But then once he was supposedly healthy again, he missed like another week with return to competition conditioning. So you basically missed 2 weeks for being sick after you rolled an ankle, after your best game ever in a Heat jersey. It just seemed really weird. And then they also say he's suspended for stuff over the course of the whole season. But I really think this was a culmination of them being frustrated with a lot of little things over the last couple of years, because I've heard a lot of reports that they haven't been happy with a lot of stuff behind the scenes. And one thing in particular is like the whole emo Jimmy thing. We've heard that they didn't like that, which I kind of think is BS, because as a Heat fan, I loved that. Obviously, that's after the whole Damian Lillard saga in which the Heat didn't get Dame. And I think the vibe around Heat fans at that time was, sadness. You thought you had this guy coming to your team and it didn't happen. So what did Jimmy Butler do to get everyone to sort of forget about that and to really move on and focus on the season ahead? He played into it. He went all out into the whole depressing and emo vibe. And I thought that was hilarious as a Heat fan, because by Jimmy doing that, being so outwardly depressed, it's almost like he was mocking it in a way to say that he's not depressed. He still likes the squad that they have here, and he's focused on this season and win a championship with the guys that are on the roster. And I love that as a Heat fan. It made me feel like the vibes were great again. It made me feel like they weren't hiding the fact that they blew a golden opportunity to get a guy in Dame that they probably should have secured. I know Joe Cronin's a bitch-ass hoe, right? So a lot of that's on him too. But besides that, they didn't just act like it never happened. That was a way of Jimmy actually addressing it, which as fans, we kind of like when they address this stuff instead of acting like this never happened, Like even Kevin Love's been on social media the last couple of days just absolutely trolling with the Jimmy stuff. He even posted like an emo Jimmy Butler meme the other day with a guy who was dressed emo but wasn't Jimmy Butler. I don't know. He's posted a whole bunch of memes. Go check Kevin Love's Instagram for that. But as a fan, I like it because they're like acknowledging, hey, we understand what's going on, but let's try to make light of the situation as far as, teammates who they can't do nothing about it. So, Kevin Love's sitting here. I'm sure he likes Jimmy Butler. I'm sure he likes the Heat, but he can't do nothing about the situation. So why not just laugh about it, have a good time, and try to bring up the spirits of everyone around him and all the fans? And I think that's what Jimmy was doing with Emo Jimmy. So I liked it, but we've heard the Heat didn't like it. And now this season, you've had Jimmy Butler changing his hair colors. He was trolling with the whole, the tweet that said, what if Jimmy shows up tomorrow with orange hair? Because the Phoenix Suns were supposedly also interested in him. And then Jimmy showed up with the orange hair. So as a fan, again, I kind of thought it was a little bit funny, but I'm sure the front office did not like that. And I think in this statement, when they say they've suspended Jimmy for stuff throughout the season, I think they're also talking about the hair color stuff and the trolling, which to me is just honestly ridiculous. And then, of course, the last part of their statement says that they're now listening to offers for Jimmy Butler, which they kind of had to say because it was not even a week ago where Pat Riley came out and said, let me make this abundantly clear. We are not trading Jimmy Butler. And, of course, here's a whole pivot just a week later, right? So we were wondering at the time when Pat Riley said that if it was just damage control. And I think it was. I think Jimmy was offended after the initial reports came out that the Heat were shopping him, that there was no denial from the front office. So now Pat Riley tried to do denial, but it was too late. And at this point, I think the Heat's relationship with Jimmy Butler was already kind of irreparable at this point, because I think that's kind of what changed, But I just wonder why it had to get ugly, right? Because if this is about the money stuff, which I think that is a big part of it as well, because in yesterday's video, I posted a 30-minute video breaking down what the hell happened. There was like 4 factors. There was the money. There was Jimmy being offended by Pat Riley's comments. There was apparently his role, which Jimmy just said in the last game. And I'm not sure how true that is, but I think it's a few things, right? But if it is the money, I don't see why it had to get this ugly. Like, these guys have been through so much together, Jimmy's camp in the front office. They've been to 2 finals. Like, they've been through thick and thin. If they can't come to terms on a contract agreement, why can't they just agree to mutually part ways and find a trade suitor that works for both sides? I don't know why it had to get so ugly. And now you have Jimmy Butler suspended, and it just sucks. Because I'm sure they might mend fences one day when Jimmy Butler gets his jersey retired. We've been through this whole spiel with D Wade, of course, and then Shaq, and it'll happen with LeBron when we retire his jersey. I think LeBron and the Heat have kind of already mended fences, but it was frosty for a while. Now we're going to have to go through the same thing with Jimmy Butler, and it sucks. I don't know why you couldn't mutually agree that, hey, Jimmy wants to get paid. We don't want to pay you. Let's find a way to work this out and split amicably. I don't get it. Because now it's going to get even uglier, because the NBA Players Association, they also put out a statement basically saying that they're gonna fight. They're gonna file a grievance against the Heat suspension. Their actual quote says, the 7-game suspension imposed tonight by the Miami Heat on Jimmy Butler is excessive and inappropriate, and we will intend to file a grievance challenging the discipline. So it's going to be a weird 7 days, man. Truthfully, I think this means that we've seen the last of Jimmy Butler in a Heat jersey, because certainly 7 games is a lot. So what I think that means personally is the Heat set themselves a set deadline to get Jimmy Butler moved by. Because 7 games is basically a couple weeks. If you want to look at the schedule here coming up, game 1 is versus the Jazz, and then they play. They got a West Coast road trip in which they play the Kings, Warriors, Jazz again, Blazers, Clippers, and Lakers. And then they come back home versus Denver Nuggets, which will be the game he's first eligible to return. So this puts them at January 17th. That's 3 weeks before the trade deadline. So I guess if they wanted to set themselves a deadline to trade Jimmy, they maybe could have did it a little bit longer. But you're not going to suspend Jimmy for a month and a half. You're not going to do that. So maybe they just said, hey, we'll suspend you the next home game, suspend you for the West Coast trip. Don't even travel with us. We'll worry about this when we get back. And it's also possible that that's the case, because if you can't trade Jimmy, I don't know what you're going to do. The problem is you can't just tell him to sit out, because you mutually have to agree to that. Jimmy has to agree to that, and the Heat have to agree to that. Because right now with this suspension, I think Jimmy's missing out on like $3 million, like $3 million worth of game checks, which is insane. So I think the Heat are really going to spend these next 2 weeks, these next 7 games, finding a trade partner. And I think that's the deadline they set to themselves to move Jimmy Butler. I really do. And it sucks, man. It sucks that was our last time seeing Jimmy Butler in the Heat jersey, potentially. As a fan, I'm still kind of hoping out that maybe there is no trade suitor. Then Jimmy comes back versus Nuggets and balls out, and both sides could kind of kiss and make up, and then happily ever after, right? But that's not how things work, in real life. Breakups are never pretty. And that's just the reality of it. As far as what to look for in a trade, I'm certainly going to have much more trade videos coming up in the next week or two. I'll build my own trade packages and stuff, but I really want to sit down and play around with the trade machine and find things that I actually think works. But it is pretty well documented and obvious that there's 3 things that the Heat would need in a trade package. I guess one of 3 things. All of them would be great, but obviously one of these 3 things: financial flexibility, because Jimmy Butler does have a player option next year. We're thinking he'd opt out. So basically his money would come off the books if you let him walk. So if you get a player in return via trade, you also want someone whose money will come off the books, essentially. So you still have that financial freedom, unless you get the second thing the Heat might be looking for, which is a first-round pick or a couple of first-round picks. We know the Heat don't want Bradley Beal's contract, but if the Suns find a way to get a couple first-round picks and then attach those to Bradley Beal, you're damn right the Heat would accept Bradley Beal if they get him with 3 first-round picks. I don't think that's realistic, but still, I think the Heat would be willing to take on some more money if there was some first-round picks attached. Or maybe you find a win-now piece. Listen, the Phoenix Suns are struggling. Maybe they decide they want to move on from Kevin Durant, or he decides he wants to move on. There's a world out there where there's a 3-team trade, or maybe KD's unhappy, Jimmy's unhappy. You do a little flippy flip, kind of like we saw with Ben Simmons and James Harden just a couple years ago. Maybe he's out there to a lesser extent, a guy like De'Aaron Fox, who I still love, and he'd be maybe even better than KD because he's win now and for the future. And then even to a lesser extent than him, you still got guys like Brandon Ingram, who would definitely be the most likely, because I think Ingram is definitely there if the Heat want him. Now, the Pelicans, they, of course, don't want Jimmy Butler. They're not a win-now team. They only won like 5 games this year. But he's out there. You could find a third team to get Jimmy to, but obviously Ingram isn't quite the player that a couple of those other guys are. Obviously, some of the teams we heard were interested, like the Warriors. Report came out today that they're not interested, and they don't want to trade Jonathan Kuminga anymore because he's averaging like 26 points per game since Christmas, which is crazy. But I don't really buy into those reports, because if the Warriors did want to trade Kuminga, they would put out there that they don't want to trade Kuminga. That's called driving up trade value. So I don't really buy into any of that stuff, and I could still see them getting desperate, because right now you want to build around Curry to build in his window, which is the next couple of seasons. I think you could do that with a guy like Jimmy Butler more so than a young kid like Kuminga, Moses Moody, and whoever else. And Andrew Wiggins has also been hooping, so I think Heat fans might be pleasantly surprised if they were to end up with him. But another team like the Rockets, similar report came out that they're also no longer interested, which, again, if they were interested, I think they'd say they weren't. That's just how you kind of get leverage in this game. But one of the guys I was kind of interested in them is Jabari Smith Jr. He's not having a great season. He's not really off to a great start to his career, but he's like 22 years old, and he's been fine. He hasn't been bad, but he was the 3rd pick in the draft, and he hasn't been living up to that yet. He obviously still can, but I was intrigued because he is a great defender. He's 6'10" with great size, and he's shown an ability to stretch the floor, something obviously that he can use. Problem with him, though, is he just fractured his hand. So he'll be out 1 to 2 months, they said, which of course complicates a trade if you're trying to move on, or if you're trying to move Jimmy for him in the next couple of weeks. But anyways, if you were to just keep Jimmy and not trade him, that's a bit of a problem. I know he said he's open to going anywhere, so some people think a trade is obviously doable, but just because Jimmy's open to going anywhere doesn't mean most teams want him. The only teams that would want a 35-year-old Jimmy Butler that's asking for a max extension is teams that's ready to win now. And how many teams out there are truly contenders if you add Jimmy Butler? I think there's only a handful. But taking it to the offseason could benefit the Heat. Maybe it could benefit Jimmy because the only teams with cap space right now is like the Detroit Pistons to be able to absorb some more money. But in the offseason, I read like 9 more teams could accept money, making sort of a 3 or 4 team trade more doable. Obviously, you got the Brooklyn Nets that could pay Jimmy outright. So if he wants more money, the offseason might be more beneficial to Jimmy as well as waiting to get moved. The problem is, though, can you hold on to Jimmy for the rest of the season? We saw how bad the vibes were in that last game versus the I forgot who they even played in the last game. The Pacers, right? They blew our ass out. We saw how bad the vibes were. Can you take Jimmy into the rest of the season if the vibes are like that and he's sitting at the end of the bench? I don't know. Now, I think his teammates like Jimmy, but still, the vibes are generally based for a team based off how your star player acts. And if that's how Jimmy Butler's acting, I think it will kind of rub off on everyone else. But also, as I stated earlier, you got to have a mutual decision to sit out, right? The team and the player. I don't think Jimmy would want to sit out, because then who's going to pay him if he just came off half a season not even playing? So I don't know. And then you also got the concern that he might opt into it next year, in which he's getting paid $52 million next season just to screw the Heat over. And now what? We got to do the whole same song and dance next year for a whole season this time? I don't know. There's really not a great solution here. It's just unfortunate, though, that you're having these young guys still have to answer for it. Bam Adebayo was asked about it today. He said it's disappointing when you see the organization and a player going head-to-head like that. But for the rest of us, you just got to figure out how to win games. I saw Jaime Jaquez was asked about it earlier, and he just tried to put a positive spin on it, saying that he's excited for, some more opportunities and whatnot. But it sucks, because you do got some good things going on with this team with the young guys. Tyler Hero's been balling, but now we can't talk about it. We're supposed to be voting for him to be an all-star every day, but instead of talking about his play, we're talking about Jimmy Butler. Khalil Ware had an incredible 25-point game last game versus the Pacers. I know they lost, but it would have been nice to spend some more time highlighting Khalil Ware. But now we can't do that because of Jimmy Butler. So there's just a lot of unfortunate things going on. I'm wondering if the Heat could have foreseen this coming. I know Ethan Skolnick has reported that apparently Jimmy lied to them and his camp lied to them, and he said he was going to be a good camper, but I think Jimmy was a good camper. I mean, if you listen to his media day quote, which we played yesterday, he said an extension's only a couple dollars. I'm here to play basketball and play more games, as Pat Riley said I should. And he didn't say it in a sarcastic tone. He meant it. So what happened between then and now? I think something behind the scenes happened. I think something was said. I think some sort of disrespect was directed towards Jimmy Butler from someone in the front office. I don't know what it was, but that whole thing about him being sick is just very weird. And this situation kind of elevated from, respectful to ugly really, really quick. So I think we'll learn more as the days goes on, and some dirty laundry is definitely about to get aired. But that's really all I got to say for this video. The Heat do play the Utah Jazz tonight. I'm home here in my childhood home because I'm going to a cousin's engagement party at night. And then I am driving back up to Fort Myers after the game. So post game might be a little late. It might be on time. I don't know. It depends how long the drive is back. But either way, I'll see y'all after the post game today because it should be interesting. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We're less than 50 subs away from 6K, which is dope. So if you're not subscribed, make sure you hit that button for me. All the support is greatly appreciated. I'll see you on the next one. Peace out.
Look, pull up in the city trying to get that dead face. Do it on my own, I don't need no dead weight. Had to kill him off, yeah, I need a head space. You know this homegrown bitch don't offend me.